Okay, let's continue here. Everybody get comfortable, just relax, kick your shoes off if you want to, put your feet into the lap of the person beside you, whatever you want to do, but get comfortable because it's time for the great debate. We have two tables here. We have an affirmative and we have a negative or against. Physiotherapy research is not relevant to clinical practice. Think about that yourselves. Where do you sit in that? Decide whether or not you're in the affirmative or perhaps against it, so that at the end of it you can decide where you are. We have our various delegates that are coming onto the stage to join us. In the affirmative we have Craig Allingham, Marcus Drips and Mark Guerra. This is your table here, gentlemen. Here he is, bouncing on. Looking good. And in the negative, Felicity Blackstock. Felicity's with us there. Good morning, Felicity. Yes, morning for another half hour. Terry Haines is with us. And Peter Blanche. Welcome, Peter. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the against team. The affirmative team. And last but not least, your distinguished chair for this session, Mr. Nick Taylor. Nick, this is your moderator's chair. And your time starts now.
Thank you. So welcome, a very big welcome to the great debate. So my name's Nick Taylor and I'm from La Trobe Uni and Eastern Health, and I must declare that I am a clinical researcher. So as you've just heard, the topic of today's debate is physiotherapy research is not relevant to clinical practice. That's right, physiotherapy research is not relevant for clinical practice. I think the Physiotherapy Conference is the perfect venue for this sort of debate because it's one of the times when we can get a large number of our clinicians and our clinical researchers in the same rooms at the same time. Now, it's been interesting since the topic of this debate has been announced. The reactions I've got have been quite varied. And because of my role, I spend part of my time at the university and part of my time in the health service. Now, some of the reactions from my university colleagues have been things like, you're debating that? That's ridiculous. And also another university colleague said, oh really? I thought we'd moved on. But on the other hand, I spend quite a bit of time in the health service. And not too long ago, I had an experience where I was meeting with a clinician to discuss a clinical research project, of course. And that clinician was rather sheepishly and apologetically said to me, can I meet you at 5:30 on Tuesday? I said, yeah, sure, that's fine. And when we met, she explained to me that her manager wouldn't let her meet with me during business hours because that wasn't part of her work. So you can imagine in my role how that made me feel really valued, and I guess it clearly suggested that clinical research, at least from that physiotherapy manager's point of view, was not considered to be relevant for physiotherapy practice. So I think it's a debate, it's a discussion that we need to have. So today, to discuss this, we have two excellent teams of eminent physiotherapists. So on your right, in favour of the proposition, they're arguing the case that physio is not relevant for clinical practice. We have Craig Allingham, Marcus Drips and Mark Guerra. And on your left, who are taking the negative proposition, we have Terry Haines, Felicity Blackstock and Peter Blanche. Now we do have rules. There's going to be order or we're going to get the heavies up. Now the rules are that each team member will get 5 minutes to put their case. And then at the end, there'll be a 5-minute rejoinder from a representative of each team. And we will stick to time. So I think we should begin the debate. And our first speaker, in favour of the proposition that physiotherapy research is not relevant for clinical practice, is Mark Guerra. Mark graduated as a physiotherapist in 1991 and is currently employed in a health service as a grade 3 physiotherapist across both inpatient and outpatient services. And as well as that, he works in the private sector as a co-director of a local private practice. So Mark's got extensive experience in teaching and training programs within the public sector. He's an avid golfer and currently off a handicap of 11, and he's going to tee off for us today. So thank you, Mark.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to convince you to vote for us as we show you why physio research is not relevant for clinical practice. I'm very confident that our wonderful team of Craig, Marcus and myself has a strong argument to put to you this morning, so sit back and enjoy the ride. I put it to you, it's not relevant for 3 reasons. The first is it sometimes doesn't ask the specific questions that we want answered, or sometimes doesn't specifically measure the right question. The second is that it too often leaves us hanging in suspense with a conclusion that gives us more questions than answers, or a conclusion that is complete contradiction to the evidence just gone before it. And the third is that it's sometimes just too damn difficult to organise or too expensive to do so. So in the few minutes I have with you this morning, I want to show you a snapshot from my physio realm, relate it to the available research, and then urge you all to discount the research in favour of trusting yourselves and treating what you see. To help me this morning, Marcus is our model. Marcus is 2 days after his hip replacement, and you can see he's using the invisible gutter frame, new and improved, to show his main problem. That's right, years of arthritic hip pain and muscle dysfunction, joint stiffness, has now left him with a lack of hip extension control. This is what I see every day. So as a diligent clinician, I've consulted the research to see if my specific question of doing hip extension bed exercises will help as a powerful adjunct to his gait rehab. But before I do this, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to get prepared to interact with the research. First, I'm going to need my glasses so I can see the research with greater clarity. Next, I'm going to need my brain reinforcer so I can absorb the research that I'm about to receive. We all know that researchers love the look, so I'm going to put my gown on. And just while I'm doing that, let me climb up into the sterile environs of my ivory tower where some researchers do their best work. So what does the research say? That bed exercises don't appear to be of any additional benefit, that they don't significantly improve the patient's function or quality of life, or that there's mixed quality, quantity and diversity of evidence available, etc., etc., etc. In a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, it hasn't answered my specific question, or it's called for more well-discerned trials. So what am I to do? Well, as Prof Lieberman told us on Thursday, do what you want, treat what you see, and that's exactly what I did. Albeit Marcus's bridging has been exotic, have a look at the results. Skipping away to a lifetime of happiness. And furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, can I quote to you Robert Padbury, who cites on the problem of modern healthcare that we have an inherent inability to implement best evidence, and that there's an average lag time of 17 years from evidence to adoption. We can't wait that long, ladies and gentlemen. No. Let's say no to the research. I urge you to say no in favour of trusting yourselves. Trusting that each and every one of us has the fantastic and fundamental basic clinical decision-making capability to trust yourselves, to treat what comes into your clinical rooms, and to go with what you see. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the magical number 3. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 3 is the magic number. If you're a disciple like I am to the Maitland concept, assess, treat, and reassess. Or if you use Graham Appley's 3 magical words, who told us to look says more than to inspect, to feel is more than to palpate, and to move is not merely an imperative. The thing that's missing there is the 4th research dimension, because it's simply not relevant. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also show you some others who have found 3, their magical number. As recently as last month, the APA urged people to join the movement as we celebrated World Physio Day. Look how happy that family of 3 is that they did. Because we're in Brisbane, how could I forget to put the Lions and their three-peat and the happiness on their faces? Nuke jumping the net for a third time as he celebrated his third Wimbledon crown. Alberto happily showing you how many times he's saluted at Le Tour. Jeff happy 3 boxing titles in 3 different divisions. McIvy 3 times past the post. And my favourite, Cameron Ling, 3 times premiership player, but his alter ego, having too many drinks on Mad Monday, finds himself fallen down and wearing the number 3. So in closing, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to vote for us. I urge you to trust what you see and treat what you see. I urge you to say no to research. And if you can't believe Marcus Craig or myself, please ponder the words of wisdom from my physio hero when he told us a technique is the brainchild of ingenuity. Ladies and gentlemen, vote for us.
So I'd now like to introduce a member for the team speaking against the proposition, and I'd like to introduce Associate Professor Terry Haines. Terry works for Monash University in Southern Health as Director of the Allied Health Research Unit and is supported by an NH&MRC Career Development Award. He's previously worked in Brisbane at the Princess Alexandra Hospital and the University of Queensland as a conjoint research fellow. He's a full-time researcher, so brings a particularly biased perspective to this debate. Terry.
Is research relevant? Well, we're not going to just argue that it's relevant. We're going to argue that it is the cornerstone of good clinical practice. And to do that, we're going to look through the past and the present and towards the future as well of physiotherapy practice. Now, we've got a lot of APA members in the room here, and our team, well, we started early. So you've all been inundated over the last month with our subliminal advertising. For this debate, we spared no expense. Well, evidence-based practice. That's a term that we're all aspiring to in healthcare these days, and this is Sackett's original model, whereby the utopia of evidence-based practice could be found at the intersection between research evidence, clinical experience, and patient values. Our opposition today will try to tell you that by taking the best research evidence out of this equation, that we have something that's worthwhile, that we have something that you should be doing. Well, let's take a walk back through history and look at where this has gotten us in the past. With the major problems that we've faced for the human race, this is the medical profession's response to the Black Plague. Now, although masks and gowns are highly sought after these days in surgical procedures, they did nothing to prevent the spread of the Black Plague. Here we have images from pottery from a Mexican ancient civilization whereby the local health professional is disemboweling a random member of society in order to improve the health and longevity of the leader of the tribe. Now, the opposition today might just say, well, I'm cherry picking here, I'm just picking a couple of examples here to suit my own purpose, and that a physiotherapist these days would not go around disemboweling a member of our community to treat the buttock pain of our leader, Julia Gillard. Perhaps unless that person was Kevin Rudd, in which case the buttock pain may go away instantaneously. So I thought, okay, I'll think of things from their perspective as well. I'll find an example of physiotherapy success even before randomised controlled trials were undertaken. Here we go back to Jesus Christ healing the paralytic man. And when I looked up the appropriate verses, it said, "To him they brought a man on a mat who was sick of the palsy." To which Jesus replied, "If I had to spend all my life on a mat, I'd be pretty sick of the palsy too." Now, he said, "Pick up your mat and walk." Clearly, he was of the motory learning approach, and even back then, the Bobarth approach was seen as being a bit of a witchcraft. And the man stood up and he walked away. Now, here we have a win for my opponents. No randomised trial, beautiful evidence, it worked, it was great. But let's look a bit closer here. We had a patient with paralysis. We had an intervention being the motor relearning approach. We had a comparison within subject before and after the intervention. And we also had an outcome measure, gait being the presence or absence of gait. Now, I'm seeing a research project here, fellas. Now, it may not have been written up in a contemporary journal of the day, but it well could have been. And the point I really want you to take away from this is that your clinical experience, this big circle that we conceptualized at the start of my presentation today, well, the overlap between clinical experience and research evidence is a lot bigger than what Sackett ever dreamed. Those circles are virtually overlapping. Your clinical experience is made of many, many, many small experiments like what our formative physiotherapists had done for us. Now, yes, it is true that we need bigger trials, better designed trials, so that we can eliminate Hawthorne effects, blinding issues, and concurrent interventions that might be at play. However, we can't ignore the fact that your clinical experiences are really based on research. So, if we do not think that our clinical experience is based on research, then we are ignorant. If we deny it, then we are deceiving ourselves and our patients. And if we choose not to use research experience as a part of our clinical practice, then we are no better than the charlatans that have gone before us. I thank you.
Next speaker in favour of the proposition that physiotherapy research is not relevant for clinical practice is Marcus Strips. And hopefully Marcus has recovered from his bed exercises just before. But Marcus is a current National Vice President of the APA. He's a private practitioner from Geelong with clinical interest in occupational health. He's also on the board of Barwon Health and has a strong interest in patient-centred care. Marcus Strips.
I'd like to start by thanking my colleague Mark for helping me make perhaps a bigger deal of myself than I will do by speaking. I'd like to start today by thanking eminent researcher and member of the editorial board of the Journal of Physiotherapy, Professor Nick Taylor, for inviting me, a humble generalist physio from a suburban practice in Geelong, to participate in today's debate. I'd also like to thank the organisers for putting this debate about this topic immediately following the Journal of Physiotherapy oration. An oration which has traditionally been delivered by one of Australia's eminent physiotherapy researchers. And despite the fact that our team are in the process of showing you that the work of Leon and his colleagues is not relevant to the real world of clinical practice, I'm not going to suggest for 1 second that research is a total waste of time. Because I really enjoyed Professor Staker's Time in Motion piece about research being bad for you if you're a researcher. It's a great honour to be here amongst 300 of our profession's greatest researchers today. I'm very relieved, however, to see that we've got at least 1,500 passionate clinicians here today who will undoubtedly share the view that physiotherapy research is not relevant to clinical practice. One of the main reasons why physiotherapy research is not relevant to clinical practice is because physiotherapy clinical practice is about real people. They're not randomisable. They're more than statistically significant. And while some may have visual impairments, they're certainly not double-blinded. Real people are unique and they have many different aspects to their clinical presentations. They lead complex lives with competing priorities. They have comorbidities, they have varying histories, they have different experiences and expectations of treatment. If I was a researcher, I would describe them as being living, breathing exclusion criteria. Physiotherapy research is fundamentally not relevant to clinical practice because the subjects of research normally bear nothing in common with real people in real practice. And I don't know why my little doohickey's not working. Here we go. Okay. The central tenet of good clinical practice is, there we go, we're back on track. The central tenet of good clinical practice is a clinical reasoning process. As my fellow passionate clinician Mark has stated earlier, this reasoning process is central to the contemporary practice, and it's the result of the work of great pioneering physiotherapy clinicians. These clinicians have developed the reasoning process, which has further evolved as a result of careers full of clinical reflection, peer discussion, and treating real people. The clinical reasoning process is what leads to physiotherapy interventions that influence positive outcomes for our patients, for real people. It allows us to tailor interventions to suit the unique needs of a real person, and to be blunt, a real person does not give a stuff if the intervention is the result of research, is considered contemporary good practice, or has been proven through a clinical trial. They just want to get better. They just want the pain to go away. They just want to be able to re-engage in their normal activities with their families, in their communities, all of the activities that they value in their non-randomisable lives. Clinical interaction does this, and clinical practice does this, not research. Real people don't give a stuff if our peers think the treatment that they receive is right, is wrong, is best practice, or is evidence-based. They only care if it works for them. The only research study that they particularly care about is the N=1 non-randomised, non-controlled, single-trial observational study that occurs every day in their lives. All physios know that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And just because one particular cat skinning method has been proven through a contrived research process, that doesn't mean it's the best thing for any given real person. It doesn't mean that alternative cat skinning method isn't more appropriate for any exclusion criteria riddled non-randomisable individual. Only a clinical reasoning process can help with this. Real people want to interact with a compassionate clinician. They want to trust their physiotherapist, and they want their physiotherapist to understand their unique needs. Physiotherapy research is not relevant to clinical practice because it does not alter this fundamental, robust clinical reasoning process, which at its heart is really a sophisticated version of common sense. Physiotherapy research is not relevant to clinical practice because it follows practice rather than leading it. If you were to believe my colleagues, you'd suggest that without the research, the intervention would not have occurred. Research is all about going through an artificial process to prove that which we already know. For years, researchers have stolen perfectly appropriate physiotherapy interventions and subjected them to convoluted statistical processes for self-serving reasons. In recent times, they've even started to try and steal clinical reasoning. You can rebrand it as a clinical prediction rule to your heart's content, but you're not going to fool us intelligent clinicians. We know what you're up to. So you'll clearly see that research is not relevant to clinical practice. But I know we all want to practice evidence-based medicine. So where's the evidence, I hear you ask? Where's the evidence, I hear you ask? One more time, with feeling, where's the evidence, I hear you ask? The evidence is in our practices every day. It's in the individuals we treat. It's in the patients that we help. It's in a robust clinical reasoning process, and I'm sure you'll agree that physiotherapy research is not relevant for clinical practice. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, eminent researchers, and particularly thank you to my fellow passionate clinicians who will join us in voting yes.
Our next speaker is Felicity Blackstock, and Felicity is arguing against the proposition that physiotherapy research is not relevant for clinical practice. Felicity is a senior lecturer and a course coordinator in the Department of Physiotherapy at La Trobe University. She's a research advocate and is currently completing a PhD. Felicity's area of clinical practice experience is cardiorespiratory physiotherapy. Thank you, Felicity.
Okay, now that Terry has convinced you all that by removing best research evidence and relying on clinical experience alone is not the way to go, I'm going to show you that relying on patient values without looking at the best research evidence is also not advisable, and that physio research is absolutely relevant to clinical practice. We can argue that we're working with the most educated patient ever. But this education is coming from an overwhelming source of information, and we've got to give thanks to Google, Dr. Diagnose Me, Wikipedia, and the internet in general. At times it can be hard to understand and appreciate what you're looking at, and is what I'm looking at actually a reliable source of information? Are you looking at a young woman whose head's turned away, or an old lady in a shawl? Humans are easily convinced with marketing, and that's my primary argument here. We need research to guide us, because without it, we're getting brainwashed. The other point to make about our patients making decisions is that it's easy to make mistakes. This woman's the perfect example. She should have done a mini research project, used a lifeline, surveyed the audience. She might be a millionaire now. Another good case in point is if we look at all the products around health and beauty that are readily available, particularly through the internet. There's an ever-increasing volume every day. Humans are a very inventive lot, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples downloaded from the web over the last 4 days. First of all, we have Slim Ice, the first home gel that you can apply, and 30 minutes later, your kilos will melt away. We have the Stop Snoring ring. You put the ring on, and literally overnight, your snoring is cured. We have the Happy Ears ear candles. Claiming to be improving your general health and well-being, making you happier, and as the motto says, happy people live longer. There could be something in this. A systematic review by Data and Chan, published January 2011, actually did show a relation between higher subjective well-being and living longer. Not sure I'm going to be putting a burning candle in my ear, though, until someone's shown and proved through best research that it improves my well-being. We have facial flex, claiming to make us more beautiful.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Loose Leaf Beauty Report. You know, when you hit a certain age, about 30, things start to happen with your body. Parts shift, they sag, they alter, they move around. You know, we've got to start doing something to prepare. Well, my friends at Self-Care up in Emeryville have just the thing, and I know it works because a friend of mine in Laguna Beach, I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he told me he'd gotten this device. The Facial Flex comes in its own little container. He looked so fabulous, and he said it was all due to the Facial Flex. So I had to get me one of those things. And here's what you do. It's so simple. Just in the morning, you put it in your mouth, and count to 60. You're going to count to 60. Very slowly. And go on. Ooh. See how it works? He's making O. 5. Slowly, slowly.
Not sure I can watch any more of this. I do have one more example for you. This is one of my personal favourites. Have a think about biases in this.
What we've been able to do is harness naturally occurring frequencies and program them into a mylar hologram to help improve your balance, your strength, and your flexibility. I'm here with Akolo, and what we're going to demonstrate for you are 3 power balance tests. First, what we're going to do with Akolo is demonstrate the balance test. So Akolo, if you would, put your feet together for me, your arms straight out to your side. What you're going to want to do is when you perform this test is make sure that they have their arms stiff in a firm position so that if you push down, they can resist. The reason that you want to get the person that you're testing into this position is so they can understand what's about to occur. You want them to be able to feel the resistance you're going to place on their arm. So I'm going to push straight down, resist, don't let me push down. Good. Now what you're going to want to do is have them lift their left leg and find their balance point. Good. Once they're up and have found their balance point, you're going to push down again on the same place of their arm. So Akolo, again, resist until you tip over. Good. Now what you're going to want to do is perform the same thing, only with the power balance on. One of the great things about this product is that they don't actually need to be wearing it. They can either be holding it. I could set it on the top of his head. It wouldn't matter. All that matters is that the product is within 1 to 3 inches of your body's energy field. So now, recreate the exact same test. Feet together, arms out, lift that left leg. Using the same point on the elbow, I'm going to push down again and resist. A little bit of a difference?
Yeah, considerably.
Considerable difference. Now, I'm questioning a couple of things here. One, is it a learning effect? Is it a performance bias? Or is it that when the first test was done, the guy in the black shirt was holding the power band, so he was stronger? And then he handed the power band to the person in the orange shirt and whoa! So, in summary, it is not feasible to practice physio without best research evidence underpinning our EBP model. Who knows what we're going to come up with if we just let all our patients search online? And in fact, why don't we just do that? Let's just say, go Google a treatment and let me know what you want me to do. So, in summary, physio research is not just relevant to clinical practice, it is integral and is one of the key reasons your patients actually come to your practice. They are there to receive the best evidence-based care with research underpinning this.
Our final speaker in favour of the proposition that clinical research is not relevant for physiotherapy practice is Craig Allingham. After a stellar career as a sports, Olympic and circus physiotherapist, Craig is now a professional development consultant. It's a vague term encompassing business, consulting, keynote speaking, gardening and motorcycling. Craig is a published author and is currently researching his next book, which is about men and their health, so he's accustomed to tough audiences. Something that impresses me about Craig too is he also has a clinical test named after him, so that's really impressive. Ladies and gentlemen, Assistant Professor Craig Allingham.
I published my first research paper in a peer-reviewed journal in 1980. Its title, The Relationship Between Height, Weight and Explosive Leg Strength in Young Swimmers. This seminal paper was the foundation stone for Australia's swimming supremacy in the 90s. Well, it would have been, had the swimming coaches been more interested in how high the kids could jump instead of how fast they could swim. So I believe out of the 6 contributors to the debate here, I understand irrelevance in research. Research, it's out there. Where does it come from? Research is managed from universities, fabulous places full of coffee shops and libraries and more coffee shops. Tim Soufasani, a philosopher who writes for The Australian, wrote in his column of September 24 this year that the word philosophia from the ancient Greek means a love of wisdom. A love of wisdom. Not a love of knowledge, not a love of data, not a love of tables and numbers, a love of wisdom. And so we deliver to our highest quality researchers a qualification called a Doctor of Philosophy. What a farce. There is no wisdom in a Doctor of Philosophy these days, but lots of data and lots of that horrible thing called statistics, where they manipulate the data to produce a result that is not too far removed from the hypothesis. Certainly within 1.5 standard deviations of the mean, which we can remove the outlying data and bring into the middle and publish that somewhere. And this reflects the changing nature of universities in our society. Universities' purpose nowadays is twofold. One is to gain ranking points so that they can market themselves to bright young things as undergraduate or better still full fee paying graduate students because they have better rankings in the university ranking scale. So they will be able to charge more for their fees. The second thing that the university indulge in, they're very good at this, is, and this has been preceded by a parallel course from another high learning institution called Hamburger U, is the acquisition of real estate, a model of business followed by McDonald's. And we've seen McDonald's already in our presentations tonight. That's the purpose of universities. And within these purposes of universities, we have journals developing, well, outside of the university. The purpose of journals has also changed from the dissemination of useful information to gain citations, to be referenced, to be cited in other journals and by other academics, and therefore gain relevance within their tribe. The tribe that do not actually treat patients. Faculties have also changed their role. The role of a faculty nowadays is to attract funding, especially in these days of diminishing government money, to attract funding via awards, via grants, and via largesse from private enterprise. The role of researchers within the faculties. The role of a researcher is to get published. That is the universal yardstick of success, to advance one's career. So they're into that. So and to get published in a quality, i.e. much cited journal, and therefore to gain ongoing funding. Because ultimately the role of the actual research is to open up a whole field of new questions. How many times do you get to the end of a research paper, assuming you get beyond the abstract, get to the end of the research paper you're reading, and in the conclusion it says, this needs to be verified by other workers. This needs more research on these questions. We did not limit the such and such to get the do what, so we can't say to any great degree that we proved anything, but this is a fabulous piece of research that is going to lead on, worth repeating. That's the role of research, is to generate more research for the industry that thrives on research. How many of your patients read research papers? Sadly, many of them go to the internet. And I didn't realise we were coming along here to be entertained by TV snippets or internet snippets from Felicity, if I might call you Fliss, because I could have stayed home and seen that. I wanted to see something juicy, something meaty. The output of physiotherapy knowledge is huge. Huge. I do not argue. It's published, it's disseminated, it's espoused from the podium this week. That's fabulous. Dr. William Cannell, a cardiologist in America, was a participant. Well, he was a leader of the Framingham Heart Study, a longitudinal study that began back in the 60s and continues still as they follow the population of Framingham through their cardiological histories. He said any research paper should be subject to one particular test, the so what test. He went on to say that a program may be effective or not, but the real question is, will people use it? Is it able to be adapted to the clinical environment? So next time you read a research paper and you get to the end, sit back, relax a little bit, and say to yourself, so what? Can I adapt that to my clinical environment? Do my patients fit the model? Have I got the tools to actually apply the intervention or the assessment? Do I care? Whatever it is that hits home with you. And if the answer is not immediately apparent, sit back, pour a glass of red, and relax. That wisdom predates the Framingham Heart Study by centuries as a treatment for cardiological problems. Research does not have all the answers. We've been claimed today that the research base is the cornerstone of evidence-based medicine. Well, there are no, but I will give to my opponents that they have acknowledged there are two other stones upon which, or Venn diagrams that overlap. So it's only 1/3. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I don't see that you have much to fear from my whistling opponent, because he's whistling in the wind. If he is about to try and sell you the no argument, the answer to us is obvious, and the answer to all you who care for your patients in your duty of care is to vote yes. Thank you.
Our last protagonist in this debate is the whistling Peter Blanche. So Peter's a well-known sports physiotherapist who worked at the Australian Institute of Sport for 20 years as a physiotherapist and also as a clinical research manager. But very recently he's moved here to Brisbane to take on the role of Manager of Sports Science, Sports Medicine at the Centre of Excellence for Cricket Australia. So as an indication that he has spent far too long in the company of sports people, he's picked up a Y that goes after his family name. So now he's almost universally known as Blanchy. So I give you Blanchy, who comes in second drop for the team to argue against the proposition.
When I was at school, a long time ago, that was when Allingham was in his mid to late 50s, I remember the debating, and there were two types of debaters. There were the really poor debaters that set about on petty character assassination. And then there were the really good debaters like my colleagues over here that got to the core of the issues and really decisively explained what the issues were. That's not really me. So I want to really point out to you what a bunch of dirty, lying, scum-sucking bottom dwellers that my opponents are. Marky Mark and the Ginger Ninja. Yeah, there's a rule of three, a three-ring circus of inconsequential rubbish. When I first saw this topic, initially I went, what the hell are they going to say? They'll probably try to be mildly amusing, but they'll be irrelevant and completely off topic. Well, certainly they've got to the last two there. The amusing thing I haven't quite seen. But what they have filled is a huge amount of hypocrisy. Speaker one, Mark Guerra, adjunct lecturer of La Trobe University. Can you imagine what those lectures might be like without an evidence base? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so then what I do is I take my Harry Potter wand out and go, devils be gone. Any questions? Cool. And what was his argument? Research, sometimes it's hard. Oh, boo bloody who. Sometimes life's hard, get over it. Speaker number two, Marcus Drips, an advisor to the Australian Commission of Safety and Quality in Healthcare, a medical advisor to the Traffic Authority. Two organisations that, if you go to their websites, that pride themselves on being evidence-based for the best management of their clients. So can you imagine the basis of the advice? Well, there was this storybook that started where it said, once upon a time, Marcus was born and then endowed with all the knowledge in the world. The end. And his major argument eluded me completely, other than that he has something against cats. And our last speaker, really, Craig Allingham, it's just like shooting fish in a barrel. The hypocrisy. Oh, the esteemed physio educator. So what is it that you actually go to when you go to the bibliography of a Craig Allingham course notes? Is there just a big page that goes, Craig says? Really? And that's... Can you imagine if you ever happen to have to go to a court of law and so how did you make this decision on using your treatment? Well, Craig said, Your Honour. That's enough for me. Perhaps we should actually just call it Craig therapy. And if you go to the very modestly titled website, craigallingham.com, and I'm not joking about that, those of you that work in big organisations, you might find it's blocked for excessive bullshit. But first thing you see is that research shows this and research shows that, and they very proudly espouse how their course has been accepted into New Zealand because of the great evidence base that it has upon it. Now, it's somewhat a bit condescending about the research. You know, we have sometimes, yes, that young Lorimer Mosley, he's come out with some great research of lately that supports what I've already known for my whole career, so I'm glad that they've supported me. And in fact, that's the case, is that research is led by clinicians. There is no doubt about that. But my team has pointed out to you the frailties of the human conditions. We overread patterns, we see what we want to see. And in the end, you know what? People get better. My opposition are carrying on. They look to me to be like the People's Judean Liberation Front in the life of Brian. What have the Romans ever given us? Oh, education, sanitation, peace. But other than that, what have the Romans ever given us? So what has research given us? It's given us a point of difference to other people that want to live in the treating of patients. Do we want to be different to iridologists, aromatherapists and faith healers? They get people better. What can make this difference? We've got acceptance into the medical fraternity. We have a method of testing, proving and sometimes disproving clinical hypotheses. To say that research is not relevant to physio practice is nonsensical. Our opponents are Luddites and they're treating us like idiots.
We now have our rejoinders. So I welcome back to the stand for the first rejoinder, Craig Allingham.
I first met Peter Blanche when he was cubit deep with his elbow in somebody's piriformis at the Institute of Sport. And those poor athletes suffered for many, many years. The inflictions of myofascial trigger point therapy based on our leading sports institution with no evidence. But they just stopped coming because it hurt like all hell. It was easier to go out and play football. Whoa, what an interesting day. What an interesting day. Where have we got with this? Well, I've understood things, a couple of things. First of all, our esteemed moderator, when he was opening, he said he has two roles to play, one in university and one in the health service. University, the service of health. They're two parallel courses. They're not the same thing. Universities, research. The service of health is over here. So that's how different these parallel streams run. They do not cross. They do not cross. I see research as a jigsaw puzzle. Every little bit of research that is published is a piece of the jigsaw. And it's handed to the clinicians, saying, here you are, manna from heaven. We have done some research. It is significant. Do with it what you can. And we have all these jigsaw pieces in a box with no picture on the lid. We don't know how they go together. And in fact, many of them don't go together. Many of them argue. Archie Cochrane, when he published his seminal article on efficiency and effectiveness of healthcare, from whom the Cochrane collaboration is named, 28,000 people now work for the Cochrane collaboration. Have you ever been on a committee of 3 or 4 people trying to make a decision? 28,000 people regularly say most of the research papers we look at are crap. We had to exclude all these studies from our meta-study because they were rubbish. They still got published. They still got funded. But they weren't usable because they actually didn't follow the rules that the researchers set themselves. It's sad. The clinician's job is to reduce the patient's chance of failure. They come to us in hope of a better life, hope of less pain, hope of improved function, hope of playing in the netball grand final, being able to pick up their toddler without back pain. We offer them hope. We offer them a duty of care to help them achieve what they're looking to. We do not have a duty of cure. It's one letter, care to cure. We don't have a duty of cure. That's not in the law situation that my friend Mr. Blanche brought up. That's not something that's going to get tested. It's the duty of care that will be tested, not the duty of cure. So our duty is to care for our clients and to use whatever professional skills we might have, our therapist experience and our relationship skills to listen, look and feel, which I believe is the teaching model used by Felicity at La Trobe University when she's training her students in clinical skills, to listen, look and feel, not read. Listen, look, feel. Not read, listen, look, not go to a conference, listen, look and feel. There are 2 models being traded out for patient care at the moment. One is evidence-based medicine, which we've given a hammering to today, and rightly so. The second, which is our august journal has also discussed in recent editorial coverage, is patient-focused healthcare. Patient-focused healthcare. Evidence-based medicine, patient-focused healthcare. Our journal, scientific organ that it is trying to get a foot in both camps here. Do we focus on the patient? Do we focus on the research? How is this going to work? Do the patients have to read the research to make that work? Probably that would help. And they do. They go to the internet and they read sections of research. They read interpretations of the research. They read other people making up stuff about research. And they come to see us and they're a bugger to treat. I read this on the internet, that if you do this and this and this, I'll probably get better. And you're thinking to yourself, yes, if you didn't have a broken leg, if you weren't arthritic, diabetic, have multiple sclerosis and plantar fasciosis, you would probably fit the exclusion criteria of that study. We have to adapt to the clinical environment. Research, well, let's put it this way. Let's wake up tomorrow. Well, that'll be a good start. Wake up, perhaps the conference is still going. Let's wake up Monday, and there is no more research in physiotherapy. It's just no more research. It doesn't happen. All shut down, no publication, nothing. What would happen to the patient flow through the clinician's doors over the next week, month, years? Not much. They keep coming. They keep on coming. Why? Because we care. Because we adapt, because we have clinical reasoning skills, because we are thinkers and problem solvers and health professionals in the service of health. Contrast that if all the clinicians disappeared. There was no more clinical practice in any physiotherapy. These poor people would not have a purpose to their existence. Apart from satisfying the needs of their self-centered industry of publishing in the journals and attending conferences for the sake of looking good to their colleagues and to progress their career. That's it. That's it. Research cannot survive without clinicians. However, clinicians could get along quite nicely without that research.
And our last rejoinder is from Terry Haines.
I'd like to start by thanking our esteemed opposition for their insights today, particularly the insights that have just been offered by the amazing clinician, Craig Allingham. Craig, would you freely admit that you're one of the most outstanding, if not the most outstanding clinician here among us today?
No. Peter Gordon is.
Oh, right, okay. Or second. We'll put you in a close second.
I'm second. Yeah.
Close second. And Craig has told us that research and clinical practice are two different streams. They head in two different directions. Craig is obviously the clinical expert, but Craig, how many book chapters did you publish? Sorry, I don't think I heard that properly when you were being introduced. How many book chapters have you published? How many papers have you published? Could it be the hypocrisy of our opponents showing through here that they have managed to combine research and clinical practice? Well, let's look at their main argument. I've done a PhD. I've got more letters after my name than I care to be able to write out. It takes me a long time to write my titles out. And I'm glad I have them so that I could come here today and understand what they were going on about. Because without all those years of study, I don't think I would have been able to make one iota of sense from their argument. However, I will translate for you what they have said. Their key argument, their main argument, has been on relevance. That research is not relevant because it asks the wrong question, because it has the wrong patients, it's done in the wrong settings, it uses the wrong treatments. Well, I've got an easy solution here. Who has access to the right patients? Who knows what the right questions are? Who knows the right therapeutic techniques? And whose fault is it if the research evidence hasn't been answering the questions that we are interested in? Well, let's look at the reasons why they may not be doing the research themselves. Marcus, would you like to stand up for me?
I'd be more than happy to, Terry.
Now, Marcus, I can say, I'm married, I've got 4 kids, but Marcus is an incredibly good-looking guy. And he's come here today beautifully presented. He's got a lovely suit on, and yet he managed to do the calisthenics on the floor earlier for us. Thank you very much, Marcus. You can have a sit down again. Mark said that one of the reasons we can't do research is it's too expensive. Well, judging by the quality of the suit that Marcus is wearing, I'd beg to differ. And by the mere fact that he's prepared to roll around on the floor in that one, he's obviously got 3 or 4 more back in his wardrobe, back at the hotel room that he can whip out for the second half of today's sessions. I'd like to come back to one final theme, the theme of 3 that our opposition has provided us with today: the look, the listen, the feel. I'd like to put a new spin on this. Look at the literature. Listen to what the evidence says, and feel dignified that you can look your patients in the eye and know that you have a scientific basis behind what you are providing for your clients. I thank you very much.
Well, that's the end of our debate. I'd really like to thank our presenters. What a whirl of concepts and ideas, and it's really hard to think about. It's from Mark's rule of 3s to picking your mat up and walking to the facial flex. We'll never forget the facial flex. But we do have to make a decision about who won this debate. We set up a proposition and we have to decide. And we're not going to do further research into it. We have to decide now. And this is where you as the audience come in. So I'd ask you to vote with your hands up in the air. So if you feel that, and we'll see that, and we've got people from both sides here, so we'll see it's fair, because people could argue that I'm biased. But if people in favour of the proposition that physiotherapy research is not relevant for clinical practice, that's as proposed by Craig, Marcus and Mark, if you'd like to put your hands up. Chris, CEO Chris, could you come up and just help me with the judging, please?
1,327.
Chris, there's some at the back as well.
Okay, have a sense of that, Chris. So we're getting our independent assessor, Chris, our CEO.
They've got tired now.
Okay, hands down. And now if you'd like to vote in favour against the proposition that physiotherapy research is not relevant for clinical research, and voting in favour of Terry, Felicity and Blanchy, put your hands up.
Both of them. Researchers are up the
What do
front.
you think?
Researchers are up the front, the clinicians are in the bar.
Somebody's putting up 2 arms. Mark Sherburne, 1 arm alone.
It's a negative. Okay. Okay, it's official. We've had our input from our CEO, an independent assessor, and he informs me that he thought that the negative won the debate. But I thank all our participants. Thank you.